In this episode, Daniel Darancou, chief designer at PACCAR, sits down with our own data science Donnie to discuss automotive innovation, sustainability, and the future of vehicle design. Let's get started and explore the road ahead.
Welcome to AI to Z. Hosted by Airswift's data science Donnie, we delve into artificial intelligence, health tech, and more. Tune in and journey with us into the future.
All right, let the fun begin. Well, Daniel, it is great to have you on this episode talking about the future of the automotive industry and some of the trends that you're seeing and really sharing your wealth of expertise in this domain. This session I couldn't be more excited about. And I think a great way to kick this off would be telling us a bit more about yourself and your story.
Excellent. So I'm born in Los Angeles, raised there. And you could say that Los Angeles, California is probably the mecca of car culture. Everybody in California is mobile from the time they're born. It's because it's such a spread out city. And the public transportation is very, very weak. There's really no mass transit. So everybody there has their car. So I think what really makes California interesting is that we have great weather. So people are always in their cars, and a lot of industries have kind of mushroomed around the car business, like drive-in theaters, drive-in restaurants. All that was really started in California. The first major freeway, I think, in the world is in Pasadena in Los Angeles. So that, I think, is kind of sets the stage for my involvement in cars. And the reality is it's only becoming more acute as the climate is changing, the traffic is getting worse, the need and this overriding desire for people to personalize their vehicles. So the whole industry of hot rodding, pocket rockets, lowriders, every type of Bigfoot trucks. So all that actually started in California. And the future is actually very fluid right now, because the question is, can you really customize an electric vehicle? I don't know. So what kind of propelled me after graduated from Art Center, the College of Design in Pasadena, I was actually invited to come join Chrysler, Ford, and General Motors in Detroit. But I didn't want to go to Detroit. Detroit's cold. It's a rough town. And I heard a lot of, kind of stories about it. And I'm from California. So I was actually more interested in trying to see the world. And luckily enough, I got a job in Turin, Italy. And at that time, Turin, Italy is the home of Ferrari, Lamborghini, Fiat. And I was actually invited to join one of the satellite studios that did a lot of projects for the Fiat brand, Lancia, Alfa Romeo. And that actually was, I think, one of the most basic fundamentals of how I enter and how I view the process of designing a vehicle. It's a very spiritual process. It's also a very passionate profession. And I'm able to exercise some engineering, but also the act of putting your hands on a vehicle to model the clay, to generate surfaces, and to seek out opportunities inside of the clay. It's a lot like, you imagine in the Middle Ages, the Michelangelo, he had a slab of marble, and he actually was extracting the human torso out of this piece of marble. And that is kind of the way that the Italians and the Europeans, they go after the design. They have an idea, and their inclination is to extract the inner beauty of any surface and any solid that they're working on. And that is kind of like manifested in all the designs I've done. And it's really, I think, something that will probably stay with me. And more importantly, I want to teach that skill to young people because it's kind of a lost art. Computers is messing all that up because now you can create a lot of designs and generate a lot of surfaces in the computer, but they lack soul. So I want to bring the soul back into the equation.
Absolutely. And after a very illustrious career at General Motors and then pivoting to Asia, I'm curious to hear about that journey and what that decision-making process was.
Well, the reason that it was such a easy transition for me was General Motors, as you know, is a global company. And
Yes.
I had actually spent 2 years in Japan working for Isuzu, Suzuki, and also Toyota. So I already had some visiting in Korea, Japan, living there, learning the culture, learning a bit of the language, but also General Motors has a huge presence in Europe. There's a brand called Opel, and Opel in Germany is pretty much they dominate the southern part of Europe because it's a premium brand, but they also have a very strong presence in the low end of the market, that's where the volume is. And actually that's where the challenge is to do a low cost vehicle. So having been at General Motors for many years, there was an opportunity for me to join the team working on the expo. So in Shanghai, they had the 2010 World's Expo. And I don't know if you've experienced expos, but what it is each country takes turn to host all the nations of the world in these huge pavilions, and they set up the most exquisite and the most desirable aspects of their culture. So imagine a square mile of buildings that are designed by the best architects of that country. And each of these pavilions is filled with the most amazing products for export, for internal combustion and consumption, and also for showing off. So in the American pavilion, they had Boeing aircraft, they had Levi's, they had everything that you can imagine, which is very American oriented. Part of General Motors' strategy was back then it was to gain a foothold into the Chinese automobile market. At that point, their presence was kind of small. So they partnered with a company called SAIC, which is it's a big conglomerate, and they actually designed the first autonomous vehicle, which was actually production worthy, which is level 7, which means it drives completely by itself with no human intervention. It actually has radar, it has cameras, it has sensors, it uses GPS, and that project is called the ENV. You can check it out on.
And what year was this?
This was 2010.
Oh, wow. Fantastic.
So if you Google GM/EN/V, you will see these small little micro vehicles, which are autonomous and very, very impactful in terms of their styling and their design. Presence was very, not alarming to the Chinese, but it really, I think it gave them a peek into the future. You know, we were kind of showing off, and actually we're showing the best technology that the United States, Hughes Aircraft, because they were their partners, and General Motors were able to bring to the world. So that project in China, that kind of put me on the map. Right after that project completed, I started getting communications from recruiters, from companies. They were asking, hey, are you interested in joining our team here in China? And to bring some of that expertise and bring some of that magic that we saw from you and your team. And you know what? It had not occurred to me. It was like, kind of took me by surprise. it was kind of like the last thing on my mind, right? But the more I thought about it, I thought, you know what? This is a once in a lifetime opportunity where these companies are coming to me saying, do what you want, help us out. Our industry is kind of in its infancy. If you remember back in 2000, let's say 1 to 2010, the Chinese car industry was very primitive, and they had older designs, older ideas. Some of the stuff was actually pretty bad, and they recognized that. They knew that they had to catch up, because what happened with China is that they're very much influenced by what Japan did in the 70s. Remember, back in the 70s, Japan was producing pretty average vehicles. And then they kind of exploded, and they became the best selling, best performing, the best manufactured vehicles in the world in the span of 10 years, because they put all their energy, government subsidies, but also they were delivering with a lot of products using actually Western talent. A lot of the early designers for General Motors actually went to Japan to join their teams to help them build the Nissan brand, the Toyota, Isuzu, Honda, and so on. And then imagine the Koreans. The Koreans are looking and saying, wow, look at what Japan did. So that was in the 80s. And now look at what happened with Korean brands, Kia, Hyundai, Genesis. Those guys are now probably the most innovative, the most well-received brands in terms of quality, their branding, their design excellence. But it's the same idea. All of Kia's design leadership and engineering came from Europe and North America. So the Chinese were thinking, you know what? If these guys can do it, we actually can also do it. So myself and 2 other people back in 2010 came into China and started to help them evolve their methodology. And the great part about it was they did not pretend to know everything. They were very open to suggestion, and they were open to innovation, and also open to creating an ecosystem, which is now the largest producing vehicle manufacturer in the world is in China, and they are almost unstoppable. You know, there's a lot of scary things happening with trade barriers, with tariffs, because if the world does not respond and counteract their excellence, then all of us are going to be driving Chinese cars, because they're low cost, they're very high quality, they're great designs. It's like your television set or your telephone, right? All that stuff is made overseas, and we don't even question it anymore. So that same, I think, business model can be applied to anything. And I think the Chinese have kind of shown that almost any country can actually create a business model based off of those proven methodologies. So you're going to see India explode. You're going to see other parts of the world, probably Northern Europe, up there in Sweden, Finland, places where they have resources, smart people, and also the appetite to
Absolutely.
build really cool things. So it's kind of anybody's game right now. That's why it's a great time to be in this business.
Absolutely. And there was something that happened in China as far as one of the exciting projects that you worked on. I would love for you to share some insights into that for me.
When I made my decision to go to China, it came down to 2 companies. So the first company was an established car brand that had a world headquarters in Chongqing. They're called Chang'an. And they invited me to become the vice president of design. and they actually were already in the higher end stages. But off to the left was a smaller company called CH Auto, and their business model was more of a service provider. And what the leadership there had recognized is that China was ripe for local innovation and local talent and local sourcing. So through CH Auto, for the first 5 years in China, I was able to visit over 40 different car companies in China and actually design vehicles for 40 different car companies in China. I mean, it sounds like a lot, but we are doing a car a month. And when I say we're doing a car a month, it is we are creating a brand character and showing them where they needed to position themselves on the map in terms of they all want it to be like Volkswagen Golf or GMC truck or Buick. But I would say, look, guys, the pie can be cut infinitely in many pieces. So I help the Chinese car companies find where their strengths were. For instance, Great Wall Motors, they are focusing on trucks and SUVs. So that was the kind of dialogue that we had with these guys. And what happened, which was kind of by happenstance, is CH Auto, because they had a battery factory, they had a fabrication facility, they had a world-class engineering team, and a wonderful design team that I put together. Leadership came and met and decided, you know what, we are going to enter the Chinese EV market. So we formed a brand. It's called Chin2. Our logo is the dragonfly. And believe it or not, I mean, trying to get the right logo and the right, let's say, mascot for a car brand is almost as hard. Actually, it's harder than building a brand because, well, you think about it, you know, every brand has used a horse or a logo of some sort. I mean, think about all the brands out there, the Bull with the Ram pickup truck and the Chevrolet, the bow tie and the Ford oval. And those attributes is what we call the crown jewel of the company. So for us, building on the idea that the dragonfly is silent, it's lightweight, it's exotic, but also has very, very high spiritual value in Asia because the dragonfly represents water, and water is life. And in Asia, when the dragonflies come out, it's a good day because that means the rains will come, the crops will get watered, the houses will be washed, you know, so it's a very spiritual and a very powerful brand. And we owned it and we really leveraged it. And that was actually one of the more outer moments I had was when people would come up to me and they wouldn't even call the brand Chin2. They would ask me about the Dragonfly brand. You know, they called it that Dragonfly car, right? And that vehicle was basically defined by what had not been done or ever even considered in China, which was a race car, a fully functional, 100% carbon fiber design body with very high output motor using state-of-the-art equipment from all over the world. What made our job probably even 10 times more difficult is that in China, there is no history of motorsports. Nobody races cars in China. They do have some races, which are like rally and some track racing is starting to emerge. Formula One in late to China, but our engineers had never designed the suspension to handle high speeds. So we actually flew around the world and we interviewed people from Williams Racing, Lotus, from Brembo, Nardi, from companies that are very much have a history in racing, performance, motorsports. And we actually imported a lot of technology and we imported a lot of resources and talent to set up the car. Because the other problem was even the motorsports teams had not understood the dynamic of moving around a super heavy battery. Because, if you have a V8 or V12 or V6, you know pretty much where the mass is, how it's going to react to cornering, to, straight speeds, oval tracks, even rally. But in an electric vehicle, you have so much mass, and it's so not unstable, but it's very problematic from the suspension. The dynamics of the components have to be actually almost over-designed to withstand the stresses and the stress of cornering, braking, bouncing, and rough roads and all that. So we had a rough go at the beginning. Our quality was terrible. Our performance was substandard. Our sales were sluggish. But our company decided, we are in this for the long haul, and we are going to make this car suitable for export. And that's when the kind of light bulb went off, because if you're selling only in China, then you can kind of relax your standards to a degree that those people, because the average road speed in China is 28 kilometers per hour because of traffic. Yeah, it's there's so much traffic and there's so many restrictions that people buy really, really amazing sports cars, but they never really get to rip it up, right? And to make that thing go crazy. So our leadership decided, you know what, we are going to export this to North America. We entered a contract with a company called Mullen, and we were going to be proudly the first Chinese car sold in America as an import. Unfortunately, we ran into some what they call homologation issues, which is selling a vehicle in North America is extremely expensive, and it's also very complicated from a lot of rollover and crashworthy and whatnot. So at that point, we pivoted towards Europe, and Europe actually has different regulations in different countries. So our company, which is the Chintu Motors, we entered into a partnership with a company called Ital Design. Actually, it's Giugiaro GFG, and they had actually started to build prototypes and versions that are actually in Europe right now, looking to be sold in Italy, which is, if you think about it, it's almost ironic that here you have a Chinese car that was built for the Chinese, re-engineered, and now it's being sold in Ferrari's backyard. So that just shows you how the world is changing, right? And how the world is turning, because borders now are falling down. People's expectations are more for having something that their neighbor doesn't have, right? And I think that appeal is kind of the universal narrative of the automobile industry. So you buy a Tesla, well, your neighbor is not going to buy a Tesla and copy you. He's going to want to buy maybe a Volvo, right? Electric, or an Audi, or a Volkswagen. So 5-6 years ago, there were only a handful of EV car companies. What's changed in the last 6-7 years is that every major car company now has their own brand of electric vehicles. I mean, think about the BMW i-Series, XI, and all of these really, really middle-class electric vehicles. So where do we go from here? I think that is the $64,000 question.
Absolutely. And a perfect question that I was going to ask you. So just to reiterate, was that car one of the first EV supercars then?
Yes.
Oh,
Yes.
fantastic. And I have looked at the photos a few different times and it's very beautiful. And it's crazy to think that this was happening, underneath our noses. It wasn't something that I really knew before speaking with you. And it is very humbling to be on with someone that has been able to do so many amazing things. I like the craftsmanship, I guess the pride of ownership and, creativity that you have really emphasized throughout, what we've spoken about so far. And the lack of soul was something that really stuck out to me that you've shared as far as, what the industry needs again. There's a lot of beauty in vehicles, but the most beautiful cars seem to cost an arm and a leg. And I think that's why, because of the amount of detail, articulation that is involved in the process. And I'm curious, we've talked about EV, we've talked about, I guess, how the industry is really changing. Where do you see the next 5-10 years heading? Where do you see, I guess, a few different avenues of approach you could have, but what are maybe the top 2 or 3 that you see the industry heading in the next handful of years?
Well, everybody's asking that question, Donnie. Right? The reality is that in North America, the EV market kind of hit a speed bump, using a metaphor. Initially, it was very exciting. All the car companies, they started to create really amazing vehicles, the Cadillac Lyriq, the Mustang Mach-E, all these vehicles, which people started to purchase in large numbers. And they started to get the, turn the flame up in terms of the acceptance rates. But what hasn't really kept pace in North America is the infrastructure. Because imagine now people, they drive by on the way to work, they probably pass by 20 gas stations, right? But they're lucky if they pass by one recharging station. So there's been a bit of a lag, but it's not going to slow down. I think once industry recognizes that the value of electric vehicles is in its simplicity to manufacture, its reliability, and also its versatility. Because the other component that makes EV almost inevitable, and actually there's going to be multiple fuel systems, which is like fuel cell, hydrogen, and these other types of systems. Our planet is dying. I don't know how about you guys in Kuala Lumpur, the flooding that we've had in North America, the droughts, the fires, the
change in weather systems, 100%.
The snowfalls are like off the charts. So in the last 8 years, the climatic, the tsunamis, the tornadoes, the hurricanes they're ravaging our country. And, for whatever reason, our species needs to stop burning fossil fuels. We need to stop basically, burning gas. And one of the largest producers is automotive, trucking, aircraft, coal-fired power stations. So my prediction, to go back to your original question, is I think that the acceleration is going to be forced on us by a lot of outside influences and factors. Number one being the climate. Number two, the rapid pace of innovation in terms of battery technology, refueling systems, and also the introduction of much lower cost transportation. So really, we're talking about cars here, but really the narrative is mobility. My children who are young adults, they don't really care about cars like I did. I mean, I love cars, and I was a car freak, and that's why I got into this business. But actually, my daughter, she lives in Silicon Valley, in Sunnyvale. She doesn't want a car. She'll use Uber, she'll use a train, and I believe that she will be the generation of commuters that will start to use drones or VTOLs, getting from point A to point B. So we are just starting to usher in a generation of people who just want to get from point A to point B. And that is going to really change how corporations approach design, sales, but also, let's say, ownership models. You might actually live in an apartment where 4 people own one vehicle and they just share it. So there's sharing, there's subscription. So basically, you don't own the vehicle. You call up a service like you would a DoorDash or Uber, and a car, which is probably autonomously controlled, will show up. You use the vehicle. Think about the scooters. These scooters that are all over these cities, right? It's not the optimum. People don't like scooters. I mean, I wouldn't put my grandmother on a scooter, but I would put her in a Volkswagen or in a Chevy, because number one, the car will drive itself. It's safe. It's weatherproof. It's warm in the winter. It's cool in the summer. So mobility in itself is going to change dramatically and very rapidly.
Yeah, I can only imagine. And you mentioned something, I'm American as well, and after moving abroad, I realized, America as a whole, especially from a leadership perspective, doesn't say anything or agree with what is happening around them until essentially it smacks them in the face. We've got all of these things happening, as you mentioned, in regards to natural disasters, how climate change is happening. And one of the things I'm very proud of in living in, Singapore and Malaysia is that Asians seem to have a very different mindset when it comes to these kinds of, topics. You've mentioned a few different details as far as alternatives to automobiles. We have the ride sharing here, we have the scooters, we've got, all kinds of different innovative companies, and even bringing it back to EV acceptance. There's more charging stations. New condos that are being built are coming ready with, charging stations already inside of their buildings. Malls are now being revamped to have multiple charging stations. And if I'm honest with you, they have the best parking in the house as well. They're right by the front door, my friend. And I would love to hear, a bit about, because you've only transitioned back over the past few years. And how did you, view this adoption of Asia into, the EV market and, automobiles? And, you're essentially a pioneer within the space. So I'm keen to hear, some of your thoughts about this region and, what it's doing particularly maybe differently or that stands out.
Okay, well, I'd like to touch on one thing that the elephant in the room is that Americans, we are the biggest consumers of energy. We're a very wasteful society, and one of the goals, I think, as Americans is to transform the message that small cars are somehow shameful, and that it doesn't resonate with people's cowboy mentality. People here want bigger, faster, and more what they call conspicuous. But in Europe, they have legislation, but there's also, and also in Asia, there's an acceptance that energy, space, is a finite resource, because You think about it, if somebody had a F-150 pickup truck in Asia, that guy would be that'd be a monster, right? There's no way to park it. You can't put in it. You'd be taxed to death. Some rich people have those crazy cars in China, but basically people just want to get around. And so there's a lot of layers to ushering in a more sustainable future for the transportation industry. And I think a lot of it too is our media. In the North America, and actually in popular culture, it's always the big guy in the big truck or the fancy, muscle car. He gets the girl. He's the hero. He's the underdog, and he gets that respect, right? But it's a very toxic message that young people are hearing. Actually, that people in general are associating their prestige, their machismo, their well-being is validated by the amount of energy that they waste, right? So I have a bigger house than you have. I have a bigger car. I'm bigger, better. I have what more, right? So I think for our species to prosper and to survive, I think a new message will have to emerge. So what will do that is that there's going to be a design that's going to be so damn cool that even it's going to make a truck driver cry. It's going to be so cool. I mean, think about back in the 50s, the Mini Cooper or the Fiat 500, the Topolino, or the Volkswagen Beetle, right? You were actually pretty cool driving these cars, the MGs. And so I think that was because these cars were well designed, and people were aspiring to own these vehicles. So they did their job, which was move four people from point A to point B, but also it validated you as a consumer. It validated you as a smart shopper. And I think that will come back. It has to, because the current state of affairs is not sustainable. And I think that the new cool, awesome thing is not going to come from Europe. It's not going to come from North America. It's going to come from somewhere that nobody even expected. I mean, look at Vietnam's building cars, right? The VinFast brand. And I don't know if you know of Holland in Malaysia.
Yes, of course.
They actually have license to build the Chengdu brand. So I'd like you to Google Apollon and see the K20 and share it on your website if you like, because that's actually a car I designed, and that's actually going to be sold and built in Malaysia. So that's where I am. I'm kind of holding my breath, because I think that has potential to be the next big cool thing, because that car is also being looked at from manufacturers in Qatar, Jordan, the Middle East, and those people, they can buy anything they want, right? They basically, every car there is a Bentley or a Mercedes. But the young people, they don't care about that. This is what they love. This is their life, right? Their apps, their social media, their podcasts, their well-being, their validation is derived from how many friends they have, how many likes they get. And this is going to really factor in on how they make their next purchase. So why China? Why was that important for me? It was because we were actually one of the first companies in China to have what they call focus groups, or gain and derive the opinion of the general public using smart apps and using social media. So we put our vehicle on certain web pages and we created some traffic, and we just sat back and we started to generate a database of people's opinions of the vehicle. And actually, we had changed the vehicle's character because some people, when they first saw the first version of the K20, they said it looked sad. It's because the grill opening had downturned feature. So we actually went to a neutral face. And so that's the kind of, I think, exciting breakthrough that we didn't know what we were doing. But one of my young designers said, "Hey, look, you can get 1,000 opinions in an hour. Just put it on WeChat. I'll put it on Weibo." And we did, and we learned, and we pivoted, and we reacted to it. And it was free. We didn't have to pay people, say nice things. And people said some pretty mean things as well. But you know what? We needed that. And I think that's why the Chinese are so much ahead, because they don't have the history. They don't have the baggage, right, to say, no, we can't go there. They're like, let's do it. And they're going to crash and burn, but they're going to recover, and they're going to come up with something that's super cool. And it's going to be like, everybody's going to want one.
Yeah, absolutely. It does seem like, it's a natural, I guess, thought process for someone like myself or yourself that comes from a different a world, essentially, and, spends a significant amount of time, in Asia, for example, and the individual differences. And from a societal, perspective, I'm very happy to be on this part of the world, especially when it comes to the adoption of a lot of these new ideas that are really gonna, make astronomical change, especially in the environment when we're talking about the EV space and all of the practical applications that are coming about, hopefully in the near future. I really do hope, the designers are listening to the podcast, your network is listening to the podcast and really stepping outside of, their comfort zone to essentially, think about that next amazing idea, that really is going to change, that perception that, I guess of, bigger, faster, stronger is always better. Essentially we are going from point A to point B. Yes, there is an individualistic, aspect to it, but when fundamentals are, are exposed, that's essentially what we're doing. And I really hope so. I really hope that it is going to, change in the right direction. But I really could not, be more happy that you are one of the people that are driving this industry with your years of experience of what you've been able to do, and having this alternative mindset is, makes me very optimistic for the future of not only Asian automotives, but also American automotives, and, where we're essentially going.
Well, thank you. I think it's not an accident that I got recruited to work on semi-trucks. That space it's going to blow up. And I'm actually working with some brilliant people, because you imagine everything that you eat, everything that you wear, all your furniture, everything you touch had to be brought in on a truck. And if you look at the roads, there's huge trucks. Actually, at first it comes on a boat from the factory, then it comes on a big truck, and it gets basically broken down into smaller and smaller trucks or containers. That whole from factory to showroom to your front door, that whole dynamic it's a mess. I mean, these trucks are burning pure diesel, thousands of pounds of carbon dioxide is going into the air, because these trucks, they're parked in parking lots being loaded for hours and hours at a time doing nothing. So that is just, we're choking on the greenhouse gas. So the value and the beauty of having an electric truck is that the truck is only running when it's moving. At the rest of the time, it's not creating any carbon. So is that the ultimate answer? Probably not. I think in my estimation, the solution in the next 5-10 years is going to be more nuclear power plants. We cannot be generating energy from coal burning, because that also creates a lot of methane, a lot of carbon dioxide. As much as you scrub it and try to purify the output, the smokestacks, it's still pretty messy technology. It's getting better, but I think there's going to have to be more nuclear power plants. They're going to have to be created. I know Bill Gates, he's really heavily invested in creating the next generation of safer, smaller, local nuclear power plants to charge all the batteries that need to be charged so that we can go fully electric. Of course, solar will be another component, but right now, the maximum efficiency of a solar panel or solar cell, somewhere around 30 to 40%, depending on the composition of the solar acceptor. So I think that my children are going to live in a very different world, and it's our job is to initiate some of these endeavors to make it more actionable. So that's why I'm a believer in this field, but I'm also kind of a zealot because I want grandchildren, great grandchildren, and I want them to have the ability to breathe clean air and to drink, clean water, and to hopefully live in a society that values sustainability. We recycle more and buy less, disposable clothing and use paper bags instead of plastic bags. And so I'm not a hippie, right? I like stuff, but we now have, I think, options that allows us to have our cake and eat it too, so to speak. And we can have a lot of conspicuous consumption, and it can be biodegradable, and it can be sustainable. It has to be.
Of course. That was the key bit right there. It has to be. But I also think it's a layered approach. If we can, have more, utensils and bags that are more biodegradable, if we're able to have more electric vehicles that are able to have, access to more charging stations, nuclear power plants that are safer and really help us give us that alternative energy source, I guess the automobiles that are transporting all of these different goods across the globe are more effective and efficient, not using, diesel especially. If we're able to change, even just all of those different little layers, I think it'll make a huge difference in the future generations. I've got small kids, 5 and 6. So, I also want grandkids, and I also want them to have, the air that they, should have, and most importantly, the environment that they'll be able to, still be able to thrive in. And I will say that, it is, I said it already, but I really enjoy a leader that is thinking outside the box, solutioning, and really accepting that there is a problem, and not just, saying we've got a problem, but putting actions behind it. And I really look forward to future episodes and future topics as, certain changes start happening. And I would love to, continue to have maybe a few future sessions with you in the coming months.
Thanks for joining us on the AI to Z podcast with Data Science Donny. If you found value in today's episode, consider following for more insightful STEM discussions. We'll be back with another deep dive. Until then.